Hello, my name is Erica Hesketh. I'm the director of the Poetry Translation Centre. We are an organisation dedicated to poetry from around the world in English translation. We make workshops where anyone can join in and translate new poetry with us. We make events, we publish books, and we're celebrating our 20th birthday this year. So we're on a big journey around the UK celebrating that milestone with lots of partners and amazing poets and translators. So thanks very much for being here on our Newcastle showcase. This is an hour of poetry and conversation presented in partnership with the Newcastle Poetry Festival and the National Parliament Library in Georgia. I'm delighted to be joined on stage by Natalia, Bukia-Peters, Jean Sprackland and Helen Mort, and down the line by the poet Diana Anphimiadi from Tbilisi and Maya Simonishvili, who's the curator of the Anglo-American Reading Hall at the Parliament Library in Tbilisi. I'm going to say, I think that Diana and Maya are on the line. I was going to invite Maya to say a couple of words of hello.
Hello.
Maya, hello.
Hello. Thank you. I'm really grateful to greet you and to have this possibility today to introduce the National Parliamentary Library of Georgia. And we are especially thankful for your partnership and for the possibility to introduce Georgian poets and especially women poets to your audience. And thank you very much to your audience for such a big interest in Georgian culture. I have to say that Georgian literature has a long history, but it is only this century, 21st century, when it was able to be reintroduced to European readers. And now you know what is happening in Georgia. We have a little bit turbulent time. Actually, we are a very turbulent nation due to Russia. And we are exactly trying to save our possibility to introduce our culture to our European fellows. And we are especially thankful for this to your beautiful translators, our women translators. One of them I know, Georgian, and two of them I am really happy to know now. And we deeply hope that you will have the possibility to be guest of the same kind of event in Georgia in the near future. And thank you very much for this support and for this partnership. I know that your festival, Newcastle Poetry Festival, is 20 years old, and our independence also is about 30 years old. And we all try to evolve our future and to have one better future. So thank you very much. And if you will have any questions or if you visit Georgia, or if you will need some help from our library, we are really glad to serve you and to help you. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Maya. So unfortunately, Salome Benidze, who was meant to be with us today, is unable to join us. And given the context of this event, I hope that you'll agree it's understandable. Right now, as Maya was alluding to, the things are very turbulent in Georgia. The government there is in the process of passing a new law, so-called foreign agent or influence law, which would require organizations who receive more than 20% of their funding from overseas to register as agents of foreign influence. And this new bill, which is sort of in the process of being passed at the moment, has sparked large-scale protests. And those are now being suppressed in increasingly brutal fashion by the Georgian police. So that's really unfolding, in the context. That's the context for this event. The situation has, of course, taken its toll physically and emotionally. but Georgian people are very strong, and we send our solidarity to them at this time. So today's event isn't an event about that political situation, but of course it's a reminder that poetry, the ability to speak and share and tell the truth about the world is never really far from politics. I'm really hugely grateful to Diana Anphimiadi and Maya for joining us when all that's going on right where they are. The other thing to say is that this event was meant to be a dual live stream experimental event where there's an audience here in Newcastle and an audience in Tbilisi at the library where Maya is. But because of so many different things that are going on, it just became impossible to have the both events speaking to each other. So we've gone for what's now become quite an old-fashioned format of a live audience with some people zooming in from just using Zoom on their own computers. So forgive us for that. We're going to keep trying this experimental format throughout the rest of the year. But you guys are the audience for the event, as well as the people joining us online. So the running order for today, because if you're like me, you like to know what to expect at an event, we're going to have some poetry. Diana is going to read some of her work from her book, Why I No Longer Write Poems, which came out a few years ago and was a co-publication by the Poetry Translation Centre and Blood Axe Books, translated into English by Natalia and Jean. She's going to read just a few of her poems, and Jean will read the English translations. Then Diana will also read a poem that Salome Benidze wrote, which was in her 2017 chapbook, I Wanted to Ask You, translated again by Natalia, but with Helen Mort, and Helen will read the English translation. And then I get to ask a few questions of our panelists, and then we'll throw it open to the audience. And then you'll have a chance to buy books, chat to us. Yeah, that's what we hope will happen. So I need to read everyone's bios, and I'm going to make it quick, but I do think it's important that we know who we're welcoming to the stage. So let me introduce to you Diana Anphimiadi. So Diana is a poet, linguist, and a teacher. She has published 4 collections of poetry in Georgian, and her poetry has received many prestigious awards, including the first prize at the Zero Award and the Saba Prize for first collection. In 2022, we published Why I No Longer Write Poems, translated by Natalia and Jean, and that book won an English Pen Award and was longlisted for the Warwick Prize for Women in Translation. Natalia Bukia-Peters is the UK's leading translator from Georgian. She studied at the Tbilisi State University and has an MA in Russian and Eurasian Studies as well. And she's been working collaboratively with the Poetry Translation Centre since 2013.
Yes.
And her translations have been published both in the UK and in the US. And her recent books include Why I No Longer Write Poems by Diana Anphimiadi and Leah Sturia's On the Contrary, published by Fowl Publications, who are a really great independent press. Helen Mort is a poet and novelist. You've probably seen her at the festival already. Her collections, Division Street, No Map Could Show Them, and The Illustrated Women are published by Chatto and Windus. She's a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature and teaches at Manchester Metropolitan University, and co-translates Salome Benidze with Natalia. And Jean Sprackland is the author of 5 collections of poetry, including Tilt, which won the Costa Poetry Award in 2008. She's also the author of Strands, which was the winner of the Portico Prize for Nonfiction, and These Silent Mansions. She's a professor of creative writing at Manchester Met, and has been translating Diana Anphimiadi's work since 2017.
Salome.
And Salome, yes, sorry. Salome, who is not here, but her words will be here, published her first collection of poems in 2011, an explanatory note in that won the Saba Prize as well. She writes short stories as well, and her collection, The City on the Water, was awarded the Sinandali Prize. Her pamphlet, I Wanted to Ask You, was published in 2018 and co-translated by Natalia and Helen, and she's a translator from Georgian to English as well. And if she were here, she'd be able to talk about all of that, but we will have her poem to speak for her today. So we're going to welcome Diana Anphimiadi to read 3 of her poems. Hello, Diana.
Hello, good evening, and thank you for listening us and listening Georgian poetry in such difficult time for my country. Thank you to Poetry Translation Center, to my brilliant translators, to my Natalia and Jean. Thank you for everything. I'm very happy to our partnership, and I love this book very much. And thank you for this event. So. Ჩუმად წერა. მოიახლოვა შემოდგომა ერთი ხით, ჭირხლის ერთი ფთილით, ყეიდუმალი მიღმა დარჩეს, კერძე მიიგრა ყვავილები პლასტირისაგან გამოჭრილი, სიმსივნე პრინცი მინოტავრის სხეულის ბნელი წიაღიდან ლაბირინთების მეტასტაზებს აგზავნის შიშის ყველა მხარეს, სიყვარულს რაღა გადაარჩენს. მოიახლოვა დასასრული ერთი ხმით, თმების ერთი კვანძით, თეთრი ნაწნავის მკვდარი თოკით, საათის ისრის ერთი რკალით, ყელში წაჭერილ მანძილს უვლის წრესაი უკვე მე რამდენეთ, თითქოს სამსხვერპლო თიკანია ასფალტს წიწკნის და ღეჭავს ბაწარს და თითქმის პრინცმა ტარიელმა ლექსში, ამ თავის სიყვარულში დასვა პირველი მძიმეები, ვეფხვის ბრჭყალების დანაკაწრი. მოიახლოა სიყვარული, მოიახლოა შემოდგომა, მეტასტაზება დაყვავილდა და ისევ ჩემს გულს ჩაეხუტა სიმსივნე, პრინცი მინოტავრი მარტოობისგან დაშაშრული, მოიახლოა დასასრული.
Lost. Silent writing. Silent writing. My apologies. Bring autumn closer by one tree, by one frosted leaf, and keep the mysterious forest at a distance. A flower blooms on my chest. Minotaur, the Cancer prince, extends from the dark recesses of the body his labyrinth of metastases, all leading to fear. How can love be saved? Bring the end closer by one voice, one knot of hair, by the dead rope of a white plait, by one circuit of the clock's hand. It goes around and around, gripping the throat tight. As if a young goat waited to be sacrificed, nibbling the tarmac, chewing the rope. And Tariel, the prince in the poem, gave it the first marks of his love, the scratch of the panther's claw. Bring love closer, bring autumn closer. The tumour blooms and spreads, clasping my heart once more, that Prince Minotaur slashing me with loneliness to hasten the end.
დაკარგვა. სახლიდან გავიდა და აღარ დაბრუნებულა. გახუნებული პალტო ეცვა, ბოლოს რომ ნახეს, ხოლო ჯიბიდან მოუჩანდა ხახვის ფოჩები. მეზობელთან ხახზე გავიდა. პალტოთი ცოტა საეჭვოა მისი მიზანი, უბნის ცნობილი ჭორიკანა, ანდაც მისანი, როგორც აღნიშნავს, შესაძლოა პურზეც წავიდა. ცხელშოთის პურზე გაუცვლია ტყვის მასრები და აღარავის დაუნახავს იგი მას მერე. არც განცხადება გამოუკრავთ, არც მოწყენილ და ლამაზ დიქტორს გადმოუცია ახალ ამბებში, არც მიადევნეს კვალში ძაღლები ადამიანის სუნზე დაგეშილი. ის უფრო ხშირად იკარგება, ვინც არასდროს გასულა სახლიდან, ვინც სახლმა ჩაყლაპა, სახლმა მოინელა, ჭერმა, ხალიჩამ, ჭაღმა, კარადამ, ვინც გარეთ გასულა, გადაავადა და მერე საერთოდ გადაიფიქრა. მეზობელთან ხახვისთვის კი არა, წნევის გასაზომად გასვლა ციტაკილა, სახლიდან არ გასულა და არც დაბრუნებულა. ისე დაიკარგა. დიდი ხნის მანძილზე იწერებოდა, ეძებდა, კითხულობდა ვიღაც ქალი ითაკიდან.
Lost. He left the house and never came back. He was last seen in a faded coat with onion skins poking from the pocket. Did he call on his neighbour to borrow some onions, wearing his coat? It's a bit suspicious, as the local gossips and soothsayers agree. Perhaps he went for hot Georgian bread, swapping bullets for shoti puri, and no one has seen him since. They didn't put up a missing person notice, nor did a sad and beautiful presenter announce it on the news, nor did they track him with sniffer dogs. It's more common to get lost without ever leaving the house, to be swallowed by the house, digested along with the rug, chandelier, and wardrobe, to plan to leave and then change your mind completely, to refuse to go out, even to have your blood pressure tested, let alone call on the neighbour for onions. He did not leave the house and he did not return. That's how he got lost. And some woman from Ithaca has been writing, making inquiries, seeking.
Aushi. ხმაში თაფლიანი ელი ჩამიხმა, ხორხში იავნანის სურო. მივდივარ და სიტყვებს მაყოლებ, ჩემი ხარ, იცი უბრუნდებოდი სულ რომ. ვუყურებ, გადამფრენი, მეტობის ნიშნები, ჩიტები, ბანალური კარგა. როდესაც მიდიხარ სამშობლოს იტოვებ, როდესაც ბრუნდები, კარგავ. გავდივარ ცარიელი, უშენო სახლიდან, გასვლისას ოქროს თევზებს ვაქრობ, ჭერზეც და ზღვის ფსკერზეც. ჟუტავს დავტოვებდი, შენ დაბრუნდებოდე აქ რომ.
Bond. The honey heather is dried up in my voice, the lullaby ivy in my throat. When I leave, your words follow. You are mine. You know I'll always come back. I watch the migrating birds, their sign in the sky, and think of the old proverb, go and your homeland goes with you, return and it's lost forever. I leave and the house is empty without you. I switch off the golden fish as I go, though I'd rather keep them flickering on the ceiling, in the deep sea, for your return.
იმიტომ. რანაირი სიტყვაა იმიტომ. თითქოს რეზინის ბურთია, რომელსაც კბილები უნდა მოუჭირო, როცა კითხვებით მუცელს გიჭრიან გაუყუჩებლად. რანაირი სიტყვაა, თან პასუხია, თან პირიქით და კითხვასაც როგორც გემის გესს ვერ შეაბრუნებ. სიტყვა კი არა თითქოს სხვა ქვეყნის საზღვარია, სადაც ზეთისხილის ბაღი შრიალებს, ქაფგაფარძით იცინიან ცალკე გოგონები, საზამთროს ღიმილები ყურებამდე, ქალები გარუჯული მკლავებით, კაცები კისერზე შემოსმული ბავშვებით. დაუფიქრებლად მათ ზღვაში ხტები იქნებ ვინმემ გადაგარჩინოს, რომელიმე ბადეს ამოჰყვე. რანაირი სიტყვაა იმიტომ, ბავშვების ყველა თამაში ერთად, გადაახტე საკუთარ ძარღვებს, გააშეშო შეგრძნებები, ისე დაიმალო დაიკარგო, ისე დაიხუჭო დაბრმავდე. რანაირი სიტყვაა იმიტომ, ხმოვნის სახრჩობელოზე ჩამოკონციალებული თანხმოვნები. შენი პასუხი ყველა ჩემს კითხვაზე ღმერთო.
Because. What kind of word is because? It's like that rubber ball you have to squeeze between your teeth when they cut open your stomach with questions, no anaesthetic. What kind of word? Both answer and question. It can't be turned about like a ship. It's not so much a word as a border to another land. Gardens rustling with olive trees, and mischievous girls with wide smiles and laughter like frothed milk. Women with tanned arms, men with children on their shoulders. If you jumped recklessly into their sea, perhaps they'd rescue you, or maybe you'd get caught in a fishing net. What kind of word is because? It's like all those children's games. Jump over your own bloodstream, freeze, hide, get lost, shut tight, go blind. What kind of word is because? Consonants dangling from the gallows of vowels. Your answer to all my questions, God.
Thanks so much. Now Diana's going to read Salome Benidze's poem, The Story of Those Without Motherland.
ამბავი უსამშობლოდ. ალესოდეს მიკითხავ შენთვის, რას ფიქრობდა მამა შენი, როცა საზღვარი გადაგვეთა. ცალხელში ეჭირა შენ. მეორედ იგი მიაგორებდა ერთადერთ გაცრეცილ ჩემოდანს. არასოდეს მიკითხავ შენთვის, რა შეგრძნებაა, როცა გვარი ერთს ამბობს და პასპორტში ეროვნების გრაფა მეორეს. შენ ყოველთვის ლაღი იყავი და ბედნიერი, თვალები ნათელი გქონდა და როცა მიღიმოდი, მე მათში ვერ ხედავდი შენს ვერცერთ სამშობლოს, მხოლოდ მე ვჩანდი. მე კი ამ დროს თვალცრემლიანი ვუყურებდი ჩემი მთების თავზე უცხო თვითმფრინავების გადაფრენას და გეუბნებოდი, რომ არსადაა ბედნიერება გარდა საკუთარი სახლისა, გარდა საკუთარი ხალხისა, რომ ყველაზე ბედნიერი სიკვდილი მშობლიურ მთებში სიკვდილია, ყველაზე უბედური კი სხვა დროშის ქვეშ კვდები, რომ სამშობლოს მიტოვება იგივეა, რაც ახალ დამარხული მამის გვამის ამოთხრა, ხორცის გაყიდვა, ძვლების ზურგზე მოკიდება და კარდაკარ სიარული. მე გეუბნებოდი, რომ ჩვენთან წყლის გემო სხვაა, მაშინაც კი თუ ხშირად გიწევს ამ წყალში და მამშვიდებელი გახსნა და დალიო და ერთხელაც იმდენი დალიო აღარასდროს გამოგეღვიძებს. ყოველთვის, როცა ჩემს სამშობლოზე გიყვებოდი, ჩემი თვალები იყო ფართო და შენ მათში ჩემს ერთადერთ ქვეყანას ხედავდი. უბრალოდ რატომღაც ორივეს დაგვავიწყდა, მე ახლომხედველი ვარ, ამიტომაც ვერასდროს ვამჩნევდი ჭუჭხს, რომელიც ზღვის ტალღებს მოჰყვება. თებს შორის უფსკრულებს, ამიტომაც არასოდეს არ მithქვამ შენთვის, რომ სინამდვილეში დიდი ხანია გააცვდა ჩემი სამშობლოს ფირუზიცა და ზურმუხტიც და ახლა აქ აღარ არაფერს ისვრიან მიზანში ისე კარგად, როგორც ფურთხსა და ტალახს, რომ კაცი ჭამია მცენარეა ჩემი სამშობლო, რომელიც ჯერ ძვლებია ნანათქვს ანსლავს, მერე კი ვეღარ გვინელებს და უკან გვაფურთხებს, რომ აქ ხანდახან ჰაერიც კი ისეთი მძიმეა, თითქოს კლდიდან მოწყვეტილი ლოდები მკერდზე დაგეყარა, მხრებზე დაგეყარა, თითქოს ზურგზე მთელი გიორგი, მთელი მთა მოიგდე, მიიღო მიათრევ და ვერავის აჩეჩებ. ამთასაც შენი სამშობლო ჰქვია, ხელს აღარავინ წამოგაშველებს, არც ის მithქვამს ოდესმე შენთვის, რომ ჩვენთან ბრმა ტყვით მეტი კვდება ვიდრე ბრძოლის ველზე და საბოლოოდ ყველა მათგანის გულზე დაყრილი მშობელი მიწა მსუბუქი კი არა, ბედის ბორბალივით მძიმეა. არ მithქვამს, რომ აქ სიყვარული ხანდახან სირცხვილია, განსაკუთრებით თუ ქალი ხარ და ხმამაღლა გიყვარს. აქ სიყვარული არ გავს გვირილებიან გაშლილ მინდორს, სადაც უნთქავს კანით და მიწას. ჩემს სამშობლოში სიყვარული არის ისეთი უცნაური და მოუხერხებელი, როგორც ჩვენი მთის ბილიკები, სადაც მხოლოდ ცხვრებსა და გარეულ თხებს შეუძლიათ გავლა. გიყვები, როგორ შემცვეს ჯორზე უკუღმა და სოფელ-სოფელ მათრიეს, როგორ ჩამივარ და ფეხი დგავარ მარტო ჩემი ქალაქის ცარიელ მოედანზე და შორიდან გიყვები, რომ ახლა მივხვდი, არასოდეს მქონია სახლი, ეს ღვარცობიც ქუჩაში რომ მოედინება, სხვა არაფერია თუ არა ჩემი ცრემლი, დედინაცვლის საამებლად რომ ვაგროვე და ბოლოს, რადგან ჭურჭელი არ მეყო, გადმოვიდა და წალეკა ერთი ცოდვილის წილი სამყარო. შემომხედე. მე მინდა კითხო, როცა ჩვენი ქალაქის დათოვლილ აეროპორტში ისე დაგტოვე, რომ უკან მოხედვაზე არც მიფიქრია, რატომ არ დამედევნე უკან, რატომ არ მომკიდე ხელი და რატომ არ მითხარი, რომ ზოგჯერ სწორედ უსამშობლობაა თავისუფლება და რომ უფრო მეტად უნდა მყوارებოდი, ვიდრე ჩემი მიწა, რომელმაც არ მიმიღო, დამარხა და მერე, რადგან გულზე მძიმე დავაწექი, გადმომაფურთხი.
The story of those without motherland. I have never asked you what your father was thinking when he crossed the border with you in one arm and in the other his single threadbare suitcase. I never asked you how it feels when the name on your lips tells one truth and the name on your passport another. You were always so happy and carefree. When you smiled at me, bright-eyed, I saw myself in your irises, not the shape of your motherland. All this time I watched and wept as foreign planes flew over my own mountains. And I told you there is no happiness without home, without people to call your own, that the happiest death is death in the mountains of your country, and the worst is death under a different flag, that abandoning your motherland is like digging up the barely cool body of your father, selling his flesh, wearing his bones like a rucksack you hawk from door to door. I am telling you that the taste of water is different in my motherland. even when you have to drop a tranquilizer in the glass, let it dissolve and drink and never wake again. When I told you stories of my motherland, you could see my country widen in my open eyes. How could we forget I am short-sighted? I never noticed the debris on the shore, the precipices between mountains. In reality, my motherland's turquoise and emerald sea colours faded long ago. That the target she shoots at is made of spit and mud. That my motherland is a Venus flytrap which eats us down to our skeletons and spits out what it can't digest. That sometimes the air is hillside stonefall, rubble and breathlessness wait on your shoulders, a whole mountain on your back you must carry with you, you alone. This mountain is motherland too. Nobody will help you move it. Nor have I told you that more die from misfired bullets than on the battlefield, and the soil of the motherland thrown over their chests is not light, but heavy as fate. I haven't told you that love here is sometimes shameful, especially if you are a woman and you love too loudly. Love is not a daisy meadow where you sigh, bare-skinned on the breathing earth. Love in my motherland is strange and awkward, a winding mountain path trodden by sheep and wild goats. Look at me. I'm telling you about my motherland. I'm telling you a different story now. I'm telling you how they sat me back to front on a donkey, paraded me through villages for people to scorn me, how I stepped into a hole and because nobody helped me, I cut off my foot to save myself. I'm telling you, he does not love me and I love him too loudly. Love him with a different part of my heart from the part that loves you. I love him more boldly than my headscarf allows. I stand alone in the empty square of my town and talk to you across the gap. I have never had a home, and the torrent from the mountain sweeping down the street is just tears, which I saved for my stepmother until they overflowed the dish and washed part of the world away. Look at me. I wanted to ask you when I left you at the airport, cloaked in snow. I didn't look back. Why didn't you follow me? Why didn't you grab my hand and tell me that sometimes freedom is a place without motherland, that I should have loved you more than my land which did not accept me. It buried me, and when I lay too heavily, it spat me out.
Thanks so much. It's always just wonderful to hear the poems in the air, in the original and in the English. Diana, I wanted to ask you, I think you can see me if I look like this. So I'm going to face this way, even though it might seem strange to the audience. Your poetry has in its themes a lot of Greek mythology. You talk about home and the idea of leaving home and the body. And I was wondering, over your 4 collections, what are your big themes in your poetry? What motivates you in your writing?
Kaige Diana, kaige ყველაფერი.
Yes.
Motivация შენი პოემები.
Button, go. I will speak Georgian. Sorry for I don't speak English very well. So, რაც შეეხება story შენიშნა იყო რომ ეს ბერძნული მითოსი და საერთოდ ეს არქეტიპები ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანია ჩემთვის. So
you were right, Erica. These archetypes in mythology are very important for me.
და საერთოდ მე მგონია რომ პოეზია არის ესეთი ძალიან ძველი მეხსიერების გამოძახილი.
I think that poetry is the outcry of a very old memory.
მე წარმოშობით ვარ პონტოელი ბერძენი.
I'm Pontic Greek. My origin is Pontic Greek.
და რამდენიმე საუკუნის წინ ძველი ბიზანტიიდან, ასე ვთქვათ, გამოგდებული.
And so Pontic Greeks were ousted from Byzantine several centuries ago.
და მე მგონია რომ ეს მეხსიერება, რა თქმა უნდა, კონკრეტული ამბები მე არ მახსოვს, არც ვიცი,
Well, certainly I don't remember some certain things, concrete things, however.
მაგრამ აი ამ სისხლის თუ პოეზიის მეხსიერებას ახსოვს ეს კონცეპტები.
But my blood, or maybe poetry memory, somehow remembers all these events.
ამიტომაც ბერძნული მითოსი, სახლის ძიება, გზა, აი მარადიული ლტოლვილის გზა, ეს ანუ აი საკითხები ერთი მხრივ აი ამ რაღაცნაირმა მეხსიერებამ გააჩინა და მეორე მხრივ იმ კულტურულმა გარემომ, რომელშიც ვიზრდებოდი და რა თქმა უნდა ჩემმა ენამ, ქართულმა ენამ.
Yeah, and that's why this Greek mythology, eternal search for house and internal traveling, and also, of course, the environment where I grew up, and also the Georgian language, they influenced me a lot.
თავარი შთაგონება არის ენა, რომელზეც წერ და რომელზეც ვლაპარაკობ, რომელიც განსაკუთრებით საინტერესო ენაა.
The main inspiration is, of course, the language I speak and I write. That is the main inspiration.
და სრულიად დარწმუნებული ვარ, რომ ნებისმიერ სხვა ენაზე რომ მეწერა, აბსოლუტურად სხვა პოეტი ვიქნებოდი.
And I'm absolutely sure that if I had to write in any other language, I would have been a different poet.
ქართულ ენას აქვს საშუალება ბევრი რამე უფრო ისე მოკლედ გამოთქვას, მაგალითად სრული ყოვლისშემძლე ზმნა აქვს.
Okay, the Georgian language has this ability to express one idea in a very short way. For example, a Georgian verb is something else.
რა თქმა უნდა, აი ეს გარკვეულ პრობლემებს და სირთულეებს ალბათ თარგმნელებისთვის ქმნის და ნატალია და ჯინ ბოდიში ამისთვის.
Okay, of course, it creates certain problems for translators, and Diana kindly apologizes. Yeah. No, well, it's.
მაგრამ მე მგონია, რომ ზუსტად ამ ქართული ენა ქმნის ქართული პოეზიის უნიკალურობას.
But I think that the Georgian language is exactly the thing which creates a unique Georgian poetry.
მე ერთდროულად ქართული ენის ენათ მეცნიერი ვარ და ძველ ქართულ ტექსტებთან ვმუშაობ, ამავე დროს ვარ ბერძენი და მითოსი მიყვარს და შესაბამისად ამ ყველაფერმა ერთად შეადგინა ჩემი პოეზია.
Well, I'm a linguist and I do a lot of research of the ancient Georgian language. At the same time, I know a lot about Greek mythology and my love to the language, and everything combined makes me a poet, and I write in Georgian.
Thank you, Diana. That leads me on really to ask Jean. You first encountered Diana's poetry because of the collaboration with Natalia. Can you speak to us a bit about what in her poetry that you experienced, through Natalia's initial translations spoke to you as a poet, and a little bit about your process?
Yes, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so obviously coming into this kind of world of translating poetry and finding yourself confronted with a language which you just you'll have seen what Georgian text looks like on the page, and to me as a kind of boringly monolingual English person, it's completely inaccessible to me as a reader. So I was completely reliant and have remained completely reliant on Natalia's amazing ability to kind of, it's a big responsibility. Her amazing kind of renderings of these poems into an English that we could then discuss between us. And, I would take it from there. But I suppose what I was immediately struck by was a kind of complication in Diana's work that really appealed to me. These are really not simple poems. There's a kind of, they're multi-layered. Partly that's about the fact that she's very interested in language itself, as she has just explained, and the language of her poems is quite reflexive. it looks at itself, it kind of asks questions of itself. You'll have heard that in that poem, because, I mean, that's probably the most obvious example of it, although I think it's threaded throughout her work. You know, that kind of, you know, looking at a word, looking at a piece of language and asking it or holding it to account in some way, which I find very interesting. And then also, ambiguity is such an enormous part of her work. So I feel with Diana's poems that she's never only saying one thing. She has this really powerful ability to invest every line with more than one meaning. And, you know, when we talk about ambiguity, I kind of worry that it gets a bit rolled in with vagueness, you know, like, well, it's just, you know, it could be anything. You know, I'm absolutely not talking about vagueness. I'm talking about this very deliberate holding of more than one meaning at the same time, and not letting any of these meanings kind of cancel one another out. She's really brilliant at that. And that's something that I'm very interested in as a poet myself and as a reader. So that was hugely interesting to me, the ambiguity and the kind of nuance. You know, they're subtle poems. I had the experience when reading Natalia's translations and working on these poems of kind of seeing meaning rise to the surface somehow, like you're kind of looking into water and you could see the shape of something there, but then as you look harder, you know, you realize what it is. You see this kind of fish. Going into Sylvia Plath territory now, but anyway, you see this shape kind of become manifest, and it often took me many readings of one of these poems before I felt that I had the measure of it and was able to kind of start to make my own English version of it, if you like. So, and I guess that, you know, coming back to these poems now, it's now a couple of years since this book came out, and coming back to them now, I'm, if anything, more aware of that than ever. That sort of that kind of cluster of complications, if you like, which does what I think is really most important to me when I'm reading poems, which is reward rereading. You know, you read these again and again, and they mean more to you each time you read them. And that's, you know, that's the mark of really interesting work, I think.
Thank you. And you're right. A few years ago, 2018, we had our first tour of the UK with the chapbooks by Diana and Salome, and had the experience of hearing the poems out loud and discussing them. And then coming back to it a few years later, it really, they are like alive again on the page in a different way, and it really has rewarded that. So thank you for those comments. Helen, I wanted to ask you about Salome's poems. Obviously, we've just heard the long poem, Story of Those Without Motherland, and you can already hear in that one poem the sort of intimate address that's it sort of runs throughout Salome's poems. They don't all have a kind of political thread to them, but I was wondering if you could speak a bit about her voice, or how you encountered that in the translation process.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and also to repeat some of the things that Jean said, and to thank Natalia for the translation work and what that process was like. I love that image of something appearing the more you look at it, and the challenges of working with poetry that's in a language that is structured differently from how you might be used to structuring a poem in the language that you speak first. And I think we all learn a lot from engaging in that process. I'm totally in awe of Salome and her work, especially some of the texts that she's translated into Georgian from English as well. She's a polymath who does so many things. And you see that range, I think, in the poems as well. It's called I Wanted to Ask You, the collection, the pamphlet. And I think that was a very appropriate title because there's this questioning sense always in the work, and a kind of a sort of a sense of journey in a lot of the poems too. What really appealed to me was a particular kind of, I was going to say melancholy, that's not quite the right word, I'm looking for something a bit more precise than that, but a sense of lost love, but that's always dealt with humour as well. And I think there's a lot of, you see it even in the poem that we just read, which is one of the more political pieces in the collection, but also has these moments of kind of bleak humour as well. And I found her preoccupation with dreams really interesting, and how an image sort of shape shifts throughout the same poem. And it kind of links to what Jean's saying as well, about when you're looking at a poem, and sometimes I would think, oh, is this the same as what was said earlier? And then I look at it and I go, oh no, it is subtly different, and it's a very different way of looking at it. And you actually see that in the last piece quite vividly through the image of looking, and the turn when the poet says, oh, we forgot that I'm short-sighted. And these are the things that I didn't see about motherland and the idea of the motherland. And I think this isn't so much to do with what appealed to me about these poems, but about the legacy of it, and coming back to this this collection several years after we did the original readings together. I was thinking about longer poems and the value of the long poem, and how maybe my writing has changed as a result of being part of the process, because my tendency is always to kind of get things down to the shortest possible version that they could be, and like whittling things away, sometimes to the point of losing some of the maybe the original fire that was in the poem. And I think working with these poems in translation gave me some confidence to try writing some longer narrative poems, and I only realised that sort of coming back to them now. So there are fantastic ripple effects that come from communicating with poets across languages, across space and time, and that's why it's so important that we continue to do that.
Thank you. That's it's such a beautiful thought, and it's really true that encounter with poetry from other places, other traditions, enriches the way you think about what poem can be, what language can do, and it is so vital that it carries on. Thank you. Natalia, as we said at the beginning of the event, this event is about the joy of poetry and language, but there is this context. As a Georgian person, best equipped on this stage to talk about what's happening at the moment in terms of free speech, and would you say a little bit?
I think you gave some kind of outline what's happening there. I should be very cautious about, I shouldn't be, I'm in a free country, but of course there might be problematic for girls, for free press, free writers, especially women writers are very liberal in comparison. Unfortunately, we have this oligarchic Russian-influenced government right now, and all this strive of Georgia to be part of Europe, not necessarily European Union, but to be with Europe, to be with the Western world, because Georgian mentality, that's what it is. It is somehow crushed by this oligarch because his money depends on, on Russia, Putin mainly. I don't want to speak about Russia, but Putin's regime, Putin's politics and horrible. Yes, they tried to introduce this law you mentioned last year, but there were massive demonstrations of people and they had to withdraw. They had to withdraw this law, but they again introduced this law, which is called Foreign Agent Law. It's just straight like that. And it is similar to the law in Russia, which was introduced in 2012. And what it did, that most of the free press, so-called literature people, artists, they just left Georgia because you don't want to live with this stereotype name, you are a foreign agent, which means your ability is limited. Not so long ago, they also introduced this rule that foreign agents can't participate in elections. I mean, it's a terror. And since the 29th of April, there have been a lot of demonstrations in Georgia, mainly young people. I'm so proud of young people because they were born in free Georgia, 30 years of freedom. They don't know what it means to be oppressed by the Soviet style or repression, you may call it Stalin or whoever. Any kind of, and for them, just somehow it is alien to be under the influence of oligarchs and oppression and things like that. So they are very well organized, technologically very well prepared. They communicate to each other through some technological, Facebook, Instagram or whatever. All sorts of things are used. And therefore, somehow this government ended up knowing not what to do with them. So now they started just direct terror. They meet people at their doorways, at their houses, they beat them up, they physically abuse them, they keep arresting various people for having toy rifles or whatever. So, and I think that's why Salome's friends were arrested last night, and she just could not face any kind of things. But the nice thing about these young people and people are that more people will come out. Tomorrow is European Day, they celebrate. And I asked Diana this morning, I said, do you think people will be afraid to participate in this demonstration, which is planned tomorrow? She said, no, more people will come out to demonstrate. And, I said, I feel like going there. Of course, I won't make it physically, but one wants to be there. It's such a historical moment that suddenly Georgia is united. It's just like one thing, and especially young people are leaders, which is very nice because many people are sick and tired of opposition. They are unhappy with opposition, etc., etc. No, leaders are young people, and I deeply hope that we will achieve what we want. We want to be part of the liberal Western world, be it Europe or whatever, but not part of the oligarchic, corrupt, I have to say Russia, I'm sorry, I can't help it. And that it is a Russian law, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalia. And I realize that it's not easy to know how to frame it or to feel like somehow you represent your country when you speak or whatever, but it is just really important and valuable to hear what's happening now. And yes, Salome is caught up in everything. Diana is really there in the demonstrations as well. It's something that is just really live and it's happening and so much is at stake. So, okay, I feel like we've covered loads of ground. It's wonderful. We have time for a few questions, possibly one or two from the room, and then we might also have questions online. There is a roving mic, which I can't see. Oh, Helen's getting it. Would you like to put up your hand if you have a question? And I will call on you with the microphone.
Thank you very much. Which was the most difficult word or phrase to translate in your experience, and how did you come to the sort of final version in English?
Is it question to Jean or to me?
Or to everyone, really?
Yeah.
Each pick a word.
Yeah.
And
Okay, I'll start, Jean, because the first stage is mine. Yes, I take the Georgian word phrase and then I deliver it in English, which was very difficult. It was very difficult. So I tried to pick up a lot of different versions. Now, how do we deal with poetry? How I understand what she wrote. So there are, as Jean described, there are many meanings to Diana's poetry. So I had to deliver all the possible options to Jean. And it was up to Jean, as she said, it was floating up, the final meaning. Yes? Yeah, the grammar is very difficult in Georgian, I should tell you. Yeah, especially Georgian verb is something else because you have just one verb which contains a subject, object, direct, indirect, prefixes, suffixes, everything is there. Directions, timeline, everything is there. So, and in English, sometimes we ended up with 5, 6 words, while in Georgian it was just one word. Yeah, that's how it was. Yeah.
That was the fun of it. Yeah, no, that's right. And I mean, I don't think I can really pick out one word or one phrase, but I do remember that the first poem the first poem that Deanna read, Silent Writing, was one of the most difficult. And I think the reason was it was hard to know what the pronouns were and how the pronouns related to to what was happening in the poem. So, and this came up very often with lots of the poems. There would be a lot of to and fro between Natalia and me about who exactly is doing this thing. Gender, you know, and which of the people who we see playing a part in the poem is doing this, or is it actually none of them? Is it someone new? And that, you know, that's about grammar and syntax, and obviously
morphologies.
Hard for me to, you know, engage at that. I can't engage at that level with the Georgian. So again, there's this kind of extreme reliance on Natalia. But also, I think quite often, you know, I had this instinct to kind of try and even though what I love about Deanna's work, one of the things I love is ambiguity and openness of meaning. I found myself at times kind of slightly desperately wanting to nail down a meaning, a narrative meaning, because I needed it to work, to do the next bit. And I think there were phone calls in which I was saying, yeah, but which is it? You know, which is it? And Natalia would be saying quite rightly, it could be either.
Yeah.
You know, and it became about having to make a bit of a leap, you know, take a risk, try it that way. Is that right? No, now it doesn't really work. So maybe I have to go back. So it's a very iterative kind of process where you're just trying things out and always being prepared to take it back and go again.
I think that's really true. For anyone who hasn't had experience of collaborative translation or for whom the idea is quite new, it's certainly not a linear experience where Natalia would produce something and then Jean would produce something else. It is really iterative and collaborative all the way through to the final version. Yeah. So it sort of isn't necessarily what you might think of, you know, with a literal or bridge or whatever word you want to, whatever inadequate word you want to put in the middle. It is a iterative collaboration. Helen, what about you?
I think the most difficult thing in the process was a problem introduced by me, actually, which is that I was trying to, it's that thing about condensing again. I remember I was trying to condense too much and I was trying to sort of make some of the phrases shorter, and that didn't work with the syntax and with the ambiguity of pronouns and kind of it just didn't really work, and I still kept finding myself and this must be a thing that comes up a lot with translation from one language into another, getting obsessed with things like line lengths and not liking that suddenly a line was much longer than the others, and then not knowing how to balance that with the sense of the line, and even coming back to it now, actually this poem in particular, the story of those without motherland, and it's very similar to what you were describing, Jean, in terms of learning to be comfortable with a degree of ambiguity or movement in something. And there are certain phrases here that I was coming back to as I was reading it. I was like, I remember spending a long time with that particular phrase. I think particularly in the shift towards being short-sighted and trying different ways of moving from when I told you stories of my motherland, you could see my country widen in my open eyes. The kind of how that then goes to this image of, actually I'm short-sighted, there are things that I didn't see. But what I love, now going back to this long poem, for instance, is how there are these little motifs and phrases and images that come back again and again, even though a lot has happened in between, like the mountains in particular, and the eyes and the mountain path, and the idea of the land as a Venus flytrap and being swallowed. Like there are these little sort of motifs that appear throughout, I think actually throughout Salome's poetry in general, but particularly in a longer poem like this, and they anchor you, or they kind of bring you back. And so I think eventually then I stopped worrying about making a phrase do what I somehow wanted it to do, because it wasn't my job to do that. That was not, that's like trying to impose a kind of personality on a poem that is not you know, if a poem, I always love Michael Donaghy's quote that a poem is a diagram of consciousness, and I really think it is like that. And maybe you gain the most from trying to preserve in translation as much of that consciousness as you can. How we do that is another matter, and it's why it's so completely reliant on you, Natalia, and why the job that you did was so
privileged to
wonderful.
work with such nice poets as Helen and Jean. I was very lucky. Yeah.
I think the fact is that we could have an hour's conversation just on the technicalities of translation, and people who might not think they were interested in such a subject, once we were here, we could just talk and talk and talk, and we honestly could go into so much more. But I'm aware that we're at a festival and things have to run on time. So I'm afraid we don't have time for questions. However, if you find yourself interested in the practice of translation or thinking about poetry translation, Natalia will be back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to give a translation workshop together with Maimona Bibi at, I don't know the exact venue, here somewhere, on a poem by Teya Topuria, Georgian poet. So please do come back. I think there are still a few tickets left for that. If you want to read more about some of Diana's thoughts about mythological archetypes, or just some of her other ideas around her inspirations, she has an essay in the anthology Living in Language, which the PTC published in March. And there's lots of amazing essays by other poets, all from around the world, translated into English. I really would recommend that. Diana and Salome's books are available in the Poetry Books Society area where they sell the books. What else do I need to say to you? Yes, I need to thank the Arts Council, who are supporting the PTC's work throughout this year to celebrate our 20th birthday, and also Newcastle Centre of Literary Arts, who are co-sponsor of today's event. I believe when you all arrived, you were given a little postcard, and on that there's a couple of questions about the event, and we would really appreciate you taking a couple of minutes just to give us some feedback about today's event, because it's a hybrid event and we're trying new things. It'd be really very useful to hear your thoughts on that. And I really hope you've enjoyed the event, that you've got something from it, and please join me in thanking our guests.